So when it comes to bad video game consoles, they definitely do exist. A lot of these companies that are Chinese companies make these consoles that look like the real thing, but they're actually not very good at all. And a lot of these do replicate the actual hardware that they're based off. Like for instance, they have ones based off the Game Boy, the PS2, the Xbox One, and you can get a lot of these different clone systems on the internet, whether we're talking eBay, whether we're talking Amazon, whether we're talking AliExpress. They definitely exist out there in the world. And most of the time, these rip-off consoles that are trying to claim that they have like 800 built-in games and things like that that are relatively cheap, they usually go for less than $100, are not actually good consoles at all. And it looks like we actually have our hands on a brand new one right now. And this time, this one is a little bit different because this one's not trying to look like an old game console from like the 90s or early 2000s. It's actually trying to mimic a current gen console. This time we actually have one that's actually based on the Switch hardware, and it looks like the name of this console is called the Nanica Smith. Yes, Nanica Smith. I just wanted to make sure I got the name right of this product, but it is called the Nanica Smith. Here's a look at the box of the Nanica Smith, Smitch, and the Nanica Smitch pretty much looks like, of course, the Nintendo Switch. The big difference between this and the Nintendo Switch, of course, is this one is going to be way more cheaper than the Switch that's currently on the market. So the Nintendo Switch right now here in America goes for about $300, and then in any other territory, the price can vary between import tax and between sales and things like that. And this one is actually based out of Colombia in South America, and this one is actually going for about $50 US when it's converted from their peso rate over to American US dollars. So $50 and it is actually relatively cheap, and there is actually a video on the internet actually floating around of actually how this actually plays. So take a look at this video on the internet and you can actually see this thing in action. So as you're looking at this thing, you can see this thing just looks absolutely not good at all. The things that actually stand out on this console, of course, are actually the Joy-Cons. It does look like the Joy-Cons are actually detachable, and on top of the Joy-Cons on this thing actually being detachable, you can see the Joy-Cons just look very round, they look very big, they look fake, they just honestly don't look good. And then another thing that does not look good on the Nanica Smitch is the fact that the Nanica Smitch actually has a really big bezel around the screen, so you can definitely see that it's very chunky. It just does not look good. You can definitely tell that this is a Nintendo Switch ripoff. The thing that actually is, I guess, okay about this thing is the fact that it actually plays 800 retro games. It says 800, but it is 800 retro games. I guess the nice thing is the 800 retro games are going to be top quality games. According to this list, it says it plays things like Super Mario Bros. 3 and things like that. It plays Bomberman. It plays mostly NES games and things like that, and that does make sense because those ROMs are relatively easy to find on the internet. The one thing bad about this system as well, just to name some more things that are bad about this system, is the fact that this system actually has an a AV out cable, so it does use the old AV out cable to your TV, and a lot of HDMI TVs nowadays, whether it's a 4K TV or if you still get yourself a 1080p TV, actually doesn't even have AV cable support, so it doesn't have the red, white, and yellow cables, which were used many years ago. So it does make sense since this thing is $50. The one thing I want to know about this is the legality of this thing, because this thing cannot be legal just because they are using old NES games, and since they are probably using old NES games, they probably didn't get the licensing from Nintendo to actually use all their old ROMs on this system. So I still, to this day, never understand how these companies get away with making these clone systems that have a lot of pre-built games on these systems, because honestly that's definitely against the law, and most likely Nintendo could come after these companies. But I guess the one thing that makes these companies thrive and still somewhat exist is the fact that they are in different companies outside of the US, and since they are outside of the US, the legality is kind of different because they have different laws in those countries. It is kind of harder to sue them and things like that. So I'm assuming Nintendo really wouldn't want to come after a company that's not maybe based in Japan or maybe based in the US or even Canada, because they're outside in a totally different country that's pretty much a no man's land, and they don't really want to waste their time suing these companies when most likely they're not going to get a lot of money anyway, and they have to go through all the laws anyway, so it doesn't make sense. But I just wanted to share this Nintendo Switch knockoff because I actually think this Nintendo Switch knockoff is actually hilarious, and it's actually really bad as well. Should you actually buy this thing for $50 US or whatever it cost in in Colombia for the system, honestly, I would say no, and don't waste your money on this system. There is no way in hell this is going to be a good console. You'll just be wasting your $50. You're better off putting this $50 in your pocket and buying something else. I just think it's a really funny console, and I'm not really surprised that some companies out there feel the need to rip off consoles altogether. They're just trying to make a quick buck and trying to make fun of the original product. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.